All right, so if you're looking for your first motorcycle and you have it narrowed down to Harley or Indian, I'm going to try to help you today, as I have a Scout 60 here and a Sportster 883, two of the best beginner motorcycles when it comes to the Indian and Harley lineup. I'm going to tell you what I like about the bikes, what I don't like about them, and then I'm just going to personally tell you which one I think is better for a beginner and why. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. And this is all big thanks to American Biker in Latson, South Carolina. So if y'all need something, come talk to Rob at American Biker. Big thanks for their support. Now, let me go ahead and get this out of the way. This is a 13, that's a 23. But fortunately, the Sportster, the 883, has not changed a whole lot. As a matter of fact, 1986 is when this motor first came out, and essentially all the way to 2021 when they discontinued the old Sportster, that 883 motor is pretty much the same. So this being a 13, 10 years old now, we're gonna have older technology. Now I think it was 2016 or 17 is when these bikes were introduced with ABS. And you know, some of the newer tech stuff, keyless ignition, all of that. This one has halogen headlamps, of course. You have no wind protection here. There are different fairings and mini fairings and stuff you can put on these bikes, so that is something. You have a single disc up front, aluminum wheels. These came factory with Michelin tires. Heck, I think, yeah, they still have Michelin tires on them. This bike only has 10,000 miles on it. Somewhat of a chopped front fender there. Whoever the previous owner was put the crash bars on there, so that's of course something that you can do. Talking about 573 pounds. Now the Evo motor itself, this one, the 883, is like 50 horsepower. It's not a lot, but if you're a beginner motorcycle rider, one thing it does do really well is it's forgiving, and you can grow into it because there's a lot of stuff you can do with this. I'll touch on that here in a minute. We have a 4.5 gallon tank on this version specifically. Some of your irons and stuff have the 3.3 gallon tank, the peanut tank, but this one has a little bit bigger tank. So that's pretty cool. You're gonna get a little bit more bang for your buck there. We got our key on the right-hand side up at the front near the steering head here. We have a single instrument cluster right here. There's not a lot of information. You have a little neutral and turn signal indicators under the instrument cluster, and that's pretty much it. They did not have ABS on these bikes. You got a low level light for your fuel, check engine light, all of that kind of stuff, okay? Digital tachometer, analog speedometer. Whoever had this bike put a Saddleman seat on this one, and it's actually a fairly comfortable seat. It's got a nice ledge right here to keep you planted when you hit the throttle, or just for a little bit of support. This bike isn't gonna throw you off the back by any means. You got your oil cap right there. This one has mid-mounted controls, and then the previous owner put, yeah, their Harley Davidson bags. They do close and they do fit the bike fairly well, I will say that. So they close up, and at least you can keep some of your stuff in here and not have to worry about, you know, it getting rained on and all that kind of stuff. Looks like it's got a little ledge that you push down on. You got a decent amount of capacity. They're keyed, of course, so you can lock these things as well. Chopped rear fender right here. Yeah, the little key locks are on the back of those saddlebags. Got our license plate holder right here in the middle. The older looking Zeppelin light turn signals are actually attached to brackets on these saddlebags specifically. But this is going to be typically what you'll see on the Sportsters. If we move over to the Scout, instead of your chopped rear fender, we have more of a full fender, at least on these smaller motorcycles like this. We have a single disc up front. One thing I want to point out is we have a gear indicator here. When I pull in the clutch, that doesn't go away. I really love that feature. Indian does that on all of their motorcycles, and sometimes you just lose track of what gear you're in, and I just really appreciate that that is there. The instrumentation is simple on this bike, right? We have a little button on the back of the left hand grip over here, or the left controls, and we can just cycle through that. So we have a digital tachometer, we have our voltage, we have how many miles is on the bike, we got trip A, and then back to our RPM gauge. All right, we do have an analog speedometer though, which I'm really a big fan of. Now, one thing this bike specifically offers that the Sportster we're reviewing today does not is this one has ABS. So that's not something I'm going to hold against the 883 because, you know, even when I had my 17 iron, that one had ABS. So eventually they did start to put some of that new tech stuff into the Iron and Sportster series. This one has a 3.3 gallon tank, which is keyed, by the way, and it comes with this solo seat, but so does the Sportster straight from the factory. Now, one thing I like that they do on the Scout and they did on the Iron 883 and the Iron 1200 is they black out a lot of these components in here. So it just makes it look really good in my opinion. We have a full fender back here, but they've kind of chopped a lot of this away. So we're able to see more of the rear tire to an extent. You know, that one has the bags on it, so it's covering up a little bit of the tire, of course. But I do really like this design. It's kind of an old school look, slightly modernized because of the type of wheel that's on it. Rear shocks are exposed on both bikes typically, but again, we have the bags. Both pipes come out on the one side. What the Iron does is they kind of have that staggered appearance, and then on the Scout, they actually come back and they are level back here in the rear with your end caps. We have the single brake light right here, which is LED. It's the only LED on the bike. And then we have halogen turn signals back here. Now, there's a couple of important things I want to talk about on the bike. So let me get my helmet on and let's ride them. One thing I instantly notice about this bike is the seating position is fairly comfortable. My feet are out in front of me like God intended, not right up under me, crunched and all that kind of stuff. If you're a new rider, you may think that I don't know if I want to do you know, forward controls. I think it might be too uncomfortable. When you get used to it, forward controls are superior in my opinion, and these have a really nice setup out in the front. These bikes are fairly simple for what they are, okay? You're not going to be getting big floorboards and stuff like that, you know, but the position of the pegs is really good on this motorcycle. The bars are bars. I mean, bars are going to be changed by most people. Stock from the factory, these sit a little low, but they do have at least somewhat of a nice pullback to them. So generally speaking, I got a little bit of an arch in my back, just a little bit hunched over the tank. It's very insignificant though. So all in all, for a bike that you're going to, you know, rip around town on, maybe be a commuter motorcycle, maybe doing some bike nights, some, you know, shorter rides with your buddies and stuff, this is a fairly decent position that I'm in. The seat has a little bit of a ledge there, so it can keep you, you know, kind of locked into place when you hit the throttle. And that's one thing about these bikes is, you know, 78 horsepower is not a ton, but when you're talking about a bike that's 543 pounds, that ain't too shabby. And they got a good amount of torque. I should have worn my jacket. The throttle is really easy to work, so if you're going to be using this as a commuter motorcycle, not a lot of hand pressure is required to actually work that throttle. It grabs fairly quickly, so not too bad there. We got our high beam, low beam, we got our horn. It's, like I said, it is fairly simple, but there are a lot of accessories that you can put on these bikes. Both manufacturers have a really good aftermarket support system. Harley is going to be better. It just is. But all in all, both companies, you're going to be able to find any and everything you want. I mean, if you want to do bags, you want to do windshields, you want to do pegs, you want to do engine work, whatever. The turn signals on this bike, you have them on the one side over here. They are self-canceling. Cool. Yeah, it's 78 horsepower, but like I said, it's a liquid cooled motor, So while there's some minor differences because we have a 13 compared to a 23, it really is just minor stuff. You know, if you go just a couple of years later in the Sportsters, you can get ABS, right? But the way they ride, the seating position, those kinds of things are pretty significant. So that's something we're going to talk about. Let's go ahead and get back to the shop, get on the Sportster, talk about some more differences between these bikes, and talk about what I really like on the Sportster. By the way, finding neutral on this bike, half click up, you'll find it each and every time. I point that out for a reason you're about to see. Been quite a while since y'all see me with a jacket on in a review, huh? All right. So the first thing I noticed instantly, whoever had this bike, it has this throttle in a really freaked up position. So the seating position, I like the bars, I think, a little bit better on this, but look at my legs. They are right underneath me. And this is one thing I talked about on the Lowrider ST. I really hate this position. So, you know, one thing instantly, if I go with the Sportster, I would have to do a relocation kit. Now, this didn't bother me nearly as much when I actually had my iron, but that's before I realized that forward controls are superior. Now, on the Scout 60, we were at 543 pounds. On this bike, we're at 573. Both of them have a 5-speed transmission. This one, though, has the Evo motor. So, you know, the Sportster started in like 57. The Evo motor started in 86. So from 1986 to essentially 2021, when they came out with the new Sportster, this motor is it, you know. And I think, you know, what it provides is a base. It's not even comparable to the liquid cooled motor that's on the Scout 60 when it comes to power or smoothness. You know, I'm getting a lot of vibration up through my feet and stuff, but I'm going somewhere with this. Just give me a second here. But you can take this 883 and you could, you know, do some really special things with it. Now, of course, they offer, you know, the Iron 1200. They offer the Sportster 1200. This one actually is a low. So the seat height on this one is like 25 inches. So it would really take a super short person to not be able to flat foot this motorcycle. So there you go. The seating position, a little awkward because I got my, I mean, look at my knees. They're bent up, and I'm not exactly a tall person, so I couldn't imagine somebody taller, you know, riding a bike like this. The handlebars are okay. I have my turn signals, one on each side. This I really prefer over the Indian. We got our lights up here, of course, high beam, low beam. We got our horn. Let's check this one out. Run, all that. I mean, very simple instrumentation, as you can tell. This is relatively unchanged. Like I said, the only thing they really changed from this bike to my bike is this one has a 4.5 gallon tank, and then you have the peanut tank that's in the Iron series. That's a 3.3 gallon. The one in the Scout is a 3.3 gallon. So they're not made for long distance touring necessarily. You can do it, but they're made more for ripping around town and commuting. Yeah, the vibration is much more significant than it is on the Scout 60. Kind of crazy, actually. But here's one thing these bikes are really good at. If you're learning to do U-turns, if you're learning to just ride on the street, maybe you're coming from dirt bikes, maybe you're not. I mean, this is just a really good starter motorcycle. And the one thing about the Sportster series that the Scout really can't compete with, even in the used market, is this Sportster's like $3,500 and it's got 10,000 miles on it. There's nothing really special about it, but the things you can do to it, it could be special, you know, for what it is anyways. I think they got a Saddleman seat on this one. It's fairly nice. This area in here is a little bit skinnier because it's a super low. The bike's lower just a little bit. So suspension on both bikes, as far as the difference, it's negligible. Neither one of them are that great. It's definitely something, you know, worth the upgrade. Now the power on this one is like 50 horsepower compared to 78 and a little bit more weight. So you will notice that this one is significantly slower than that of the Scout 60. You know, this one is air cooled as well. So you're sitting in stop and go traffic, you're gonna notice a little bit more heat off this thing. I can remember riding in winter time when I was going to my job, and I could not wait for the engine to heat up, because these things will produce a good amount of heat, you know, being air cooled and all that. But man, I was so looking forward to the heat just radiating off of the engine when I was in stop and go traffic. And I can remember, actually, it was so cold, and you have no protection on these bikes from the wind. It was so cold, I was literally taking my hand and putting it on the engine itself just to get my hands warmed up. So, you know, there's things that I would definitely do to both bikes if I were to buy another one. And this thing rides pretty dang good. Trying to get a little bit of room here so I can get on it just a little bit. I ain't gonna be flying, that's for sure. It's basically wide open. It ain't too shabby, especially if you're a beginner motorcyclist and you're learning to ride the road. And you know, that's what this bike does really well. Probably better than the Scout 60, because the Scout 60, like I said, it's no slouch. And so it's going to be fairly forgiving when you're trying to learn your U-turns, your slow speed stuff, and just how to ride a motorcycle all the way around. And that's one thing I really appreciate about these bikes. You can do a lot with them. You can grow into this because all the stuff you can really do to them. And it is very forgiving with that 883 motor. So you're not going to be flying. If you're riding with your buddies and, you know, they have big touring bikes and stuff like that, you know, expect to be behind the pack quite a bit, and expect to stop quite a bit too. At least with some of the other models. This one is a 4.5 gallon tank. That ain't too bad. So let's get back to the shop. Let me tell you which one I like the best and why. See you guys in a minute. Here's the little game. Can we find neutral? Probably not. Whatever. Okay, let me point something out here. This kickstand sucks. Absolutely sucks. Indian just has a much better spring. I understand that it's older, but even some of the newer ones aren't that great. If you look, just much better spring tension. Much more secure feeling anyways. So, with all of that stuff being said, two big takeaways here. You can typically get into the Sportsters, the used ones, cheaper than you can the used Scouts. The Scouts have a little bit more technology in them, even if you're talking about one of the newer Sportsters compared to one of the newer Scouts. One of the biggest things though is the seating position and the motors. This is really significant. With the Sportster, while the base engine is a really reliable motor, it takes quite a bit of work to get that thing up to par with something like the Scout. So, you know, I guess my best recommendation is if you are somebody that likes to upgrade your motorcycle, you like to work on them, or maybe you want to learn this stuff, there's really no better option than the Iron 883. There's so many conversion kits, there's engine kits, and just so much you can do with this. If you're somebody that wants to grow into your bike, you don't really want to work on it like that, maybe you just want to add accessories and stuff, this is probably the way to go. Because that 78 horsepower, while it ain't nothing. I've said that a couple times. It is no slouch, but it's still forgiving enough. If you understand your limitations, you can still get into this and be safe even as a first-time machine. It's going to take a little bit more money to get into it, But these bikes were $8,000, $9,000 brand new. So, you know, the difference there is really not a lot when you look at them, you know, when we're comparing similar years anyways. So that's kind of what I would say. I prefer the Scout. I just think it's a better overall motorcycle. If I had one of the Sportster S motorcycles, this conversation would be different, because the Evo has been around for so long and they discontinued it in 2021. I think it is a staple still in Harley Davidson's lineup, and I respect the hell out of that bike. I really do. I just personally like the Scout more when I'm comparing these two motorcycles specifically. So I think overall, if budget is concerned and you want to work on your bike and upgrade it, the Iron 883. If you don't want to do that stuff, you just want to accessorize, ride, and grow into it, the Scout 60 is the better bike. And this is the one I like personally better out of the two. Let me know what you think about these bikes down below. Big thanks to you guys. See you in the next one. And as always, hold them down.